Tea, Earl Grey, hot.
And welcome to the Picard Maneuver. My name's Tim.
I'm Joel.
Okay, your audio cut out a little bit there. Hopefully it'll get better in a moment here. So the last...
I had to close that. Sorry. Yes?
I was just going to say,
Keep talking.
our last couple of videos, we've been playing with more how we're going to do the live stream, because Joel here is Skyping in, and we're trying to do better. Yesterday, we had done an episode with a guest star that in some way was going really awesome, but the audio ended up being really horrible. There was some sort of weird echo thing that we couldn't tell while we were doing it. So today the plan is we're going to do our normal recap and deconstruction of the episode. And then we're going to try to we'll go offline for a while, and then we're going to try to do another live show with maybe a guest star, with some other stuff to talk about, because there's going to be a lot to talk about with this episode and a lot to talk about with this season. So...
Absolutely. Yeah, so hopefully we're still trying to get this all being not a crazy echo. And I'm trying to still kind of reconfigure my screen here so I have all of my notes. There it is. Okay, so yeah, so we just watched, I guess I just watched, I'm assuming watched it earlier. And it's done. We watched it. Episode, I guess 10, part 2. And I guess I'm still in my mind processing a little bit. What I saw, there was a lot. I think I say this every time. True, there's a lot to process. Mm-hmm. I think especially right now, because the season's finally over. We've seen it all. They've tried to tie up all the loose ends, I guess, as best they could. I guess, what are your initial
My initial thoughts,
Tim?
So today was the day, the final episode, finally. My initial thoughts was actually, I really liked it. I was really critical, if you remember, of the previous episode, part 1. And this episode, and we'll go over this, there's still a lot of issues where plot doesn't quite make sense and character motivations don't quite make sense. But they seem to actually be going somewhere with it, and the payoff for a character acting that way actually seemed to be worth it.
Okay.
And I think we just lost the quality of your image there. I'm going to just try something very quickly. Why don't you, what did you think of the episode?
Still figuring it out. Yeah, so I'm not, I'm kind of like zoomed in on it. I can always like lean back. I don't mind losing quality as long as people can hear me. I don't mind if I'm not super crisp. The reaction is probably not as positive as yours. Look at that.
Right.
Look at our pixelation there. But yeah, I think I had a lot of issues with it. I think parts of it, I did enjoy it, but I definitely had some issues. And I'm still trying to decide. It's certainly not my least favorite episode. It's definitely not my favorite. It's hard to not say a finale. I think a finale should be your favorite in some ways. People might disagree with that, but I think you should really, when you've watched a finale, you should feel like
stuff payoff.
That summarized the season. There should be payoffs, like a lot of payoffs. There should be a good feeling when it ends. I still had a lot of kind of, I don't know, but we'll talk about that in more detail. I think it might be my third favorite episode so far, or fourth. I don't know.
I think what I really liked about it, and we'll get to that, and when we get to that part of the episode, was sort of the resolution and some of the more interesting dynamic stuff they did. We'll talk about it, but I definitely did end up liking the end of it. Oh, I thought I had you working perfectly, but you're still cutting in there somehow. Let me just...
Well, it looks good on my end. I see. Okay,
let me just try that.
And eventually we'll figure this out and we won't have to adjust it while we're streaming.
Okay. So basically, I did a setting on your video where I tried to give you higher quality just before we started, and I reverted that setting finally.
That's fine.
And you seem to be running smoothest like that. Anyway, so let's get right into the episode. That was enough setup and technical issues. But I did just before that happened, Warren, that we were kind of there with
Yeah,
our
we're trying. We're
we're
working
trying
on
to
it.
do more interesting technical stuff here with our layout. So, all right. So the episodes, the first scene of the before even the episode started, the last time on Star Trek, I noted Riker, a shot of Riker saying that line where Picard's like, "Thanks for not trying to convince me to not go on this adventure." Line, and you could
Hmm
say,
hmm hmm
"Oh, Riker might be in this episode," because they wouldn't show Riker in the last time as Riker was in the episode.
Yeah, and I mean, even if I hadn't seen that, I would have. We had already, I
Yeah.
think, predicted that we were going to see Riker,
Why am I putting my TV?
and in fact, predicted that this is how he would show up. I wasn't obviously sure about that, but it
Yeah.
seemed like what they were going to do. It seemed like when Picard visited Riker, and he made a point of saying, "I'm on kind of active." I forget. I would keep forgetting what it was called, but he's not retired. He's
Reserve,
still
something like that.
technically, yeah, he's technically still an
Yeah, you were
officer.
right
He
there.
still could be.
I was sort of like feeling like their ending was more like indie, but no, you were definitely right. And actually,
Oh, right, you said that. Yeah, you thought they were like he said goodbye to him. It's like,
yeah, and that
yeah,
was maybe me more feeling like I wanted someone else to show up. But actually, to be honest, overall,
yeah,
nothing really happened in this episode that we didn't really anticipate. Like pretty much everything that happened, more or less, we talked about in the last couple because we did a couple
we
episodes going
did.
pretty in depth about what we thought would happen. But I don't, there's a couple things maybe we didn't think of. So let's get into it. So the first scene was the Borg cube, which is I guess was beside a lake or an ocean, and this is there's a lot of awesome scenery in this episode. Some great screenshots.
Yeah, it looks really pretty. I don't remember in the previous scenes noticing a lake or ocean, and that's fine because maybe this planet has an ocean that shows up once
Tides
every,
up.
3 days. I don't
Yeah,
know,
it's
but
got
maybe I
like
just didn't notice it.
it's
Maybe it
got
was
like
there.
2 or 3 really close moons, so maybe the tidal ocean movements are interesting.
But it looks pretty, and in fact, later in the episode, Narissa makes a reference to "I have an ocean view," so it also helped Narissa with her
Feeling lonely
being,
because apparently
feeling
she's been
lonely, I
on the
guess.
Borg
Yeah.
cube all along.
The whole time, just hiding there. Yeah. So
So in this scene, actually,
I
you
guess
can just maybe see him, but Narek is running towards the Borg cube. I remember thinking he's running really fast and efficiently.
fast and far, and
Yeah,
yeah,
he's an efficient runner, and he does some kung fu later in the episode too. That's pretty impressive. So he comes to the Borg cube here, and as he sneaks into the
that
Borg cube,
he sneaks quite a bit.
we see the sort of we see him sneaking and sort of eavesdropping on Seven of Nine and Elnor, and
Hmm
they're in the dumps a little bit. Seven of Nine, I'm sorry to laugh. Just the line to me seemed a little over the top. She just goes like, "Why don't I just put a phaser to my head and shoot myself?"
Well, and
It's
that's
just
after
regular
Elnor
discussion.
says, yeah, that's after Elnor says, kind of like, what's the point of the XBs being alive? They don't have a home. Nobody likes them. And then she's like, well, I'm an XB, and Elnor's like, yeah, I know. So of course, Elnor using absolute candor is just like straight up. But yeah, you're right. Yeah, then she kind of says, well, why didn't I just put a phaser to my head? And it's a little, I don't know.
It's sad, but I like the character. And then Elnor has a good line where he's like, he says, "Then I'd be sad because or I'd miss you because you're my friend."
Yes. So as well, Elnor has a way of kind of, with his absolute candor, maybe bringing up difficult
Kids say
subject
the
matter.
darndest things.
Yeah, but then in the end, kind of and then putting a Band-Aid on it after and being like, but I don't want you to do that, even though he just said, why would X-Borgs want to live? Anyway.
But either way,
So
I actually like the dynamic between those two characters, and we've only seen them together a little bit, but I think they sort of like her rough edges and his sort of naivety are kind of a cool team. And if there was like they ever did like a movie or an interesting story arc that was just like them on a mission together, I think that'd actually go pretty well.
I would love that. There's a lot of first season characters they've created that I do really like, that I would love to see episodic. I hope next season's a little more episodic, not as much maybe long season arc, and we can see what you just said, maybe an episode with Elnor and Seven, or Rios and Elnor, or some of the characters to get to know them better. So that'd be cool.
All right, so Narek sneaks in deeper, and of course suddenly there's this cool panning shot where we see like how the scale of the Borg cube again being quite big, and then his sister introduces herself by putting a knife to his
Introduces herself.
neck, of course.
Mm.
And but then she hugs him, and then she's like, "Hey, how's it going? Come see my secret hideout."
Yeah, you want to see where I've been like hiding on here, and so I definitely noted in Narek being very sneaky onto the ship. He literally walks right past Seven and Elnor and a bunch of the XBs. I was a little bit confused why the entrance to the cube is not guarded by anyone in any way, because you're on a planet, you don't really know what other dangers or threats might be out there, like Narek, for example. So why they didn't just have like two XBs by the door?
I'm
I
not
guess
sure
it
if
would
there
have
is a door, and there might be several entrances. It looks like it's pretty crashed, and there's probably several ways to just jump in.
guard them all, baby. I don't know. So yeah, that was kind of he got on pretty quickly,
But
pretty
again,
easily,
like you were
snuck around.
saying, I think when we're in the what we thought was going to happen with the episode for this episode, you were saying that Narek was familiar with the Borg cube, and he's going to know his way around anyway. What I thought was this.
Doesn't explain why the door didn't have
No,
guards.
and they did when they first went in there. I think there was a couple. Remember the one who's like, "Hey, it's Locutus." But one thing that I thought was at this point, I was sort of surprised to see her on the Borg cube because the last time we saw her, she beamed out when she was being attacked by all those ex-Borg, and then in the net,
Did she beat though?
yeah, well, she beamed. Remember she,
Yeah, she beat.
and then in the next scene, we saw all the Romulan ships sort of warp out.
Pew.
And so
Yeah.
it strongly implied that she beamed to the Romulan ship, where else was she going to go? Of course, we didn't see her in any of the sort of the shots of Commodore O. So I suppose if she was on the
Right.
ship with Commodore O, we probably would have seen them together, being like, we're the leaders of the Vakvash.
We the
Yeah.
baddies. Yeah, but she beamed somewhere onto the cube. I kind of like that. I like that she's been on the cube the whole time. That's cool. I don't have a problem with that. Her and Narek, we also predicted our last episode. We said they're going to have a scene again together for sure. Narek and Narissa. It kind of happened the way I thought.
And they have another
Although-
scene later that we'll get to, so we can talk more about it then.
It didn't lead to what I thought it would lead to, but that's cool. And there's a little bit more of a connection between the two of them here that isn't as like violent or weird, where you can tell
That's in the next scene.
do
I
care
think.
for each other. They do still care for each other in some way.
So then it cuts to Picard's still captured. He is captured. I guess not still, because this is the scene. This is actually much of the scene we'd already seen in that reveal scene that Will Wheaton gave us. So, but before that, he does this thing where he takes the butterfly and he sort of frees the butterfly, and then we see the butterfly again in this episode, and sort of becomes a symbol of life. And I was saying right away, there's that old, and it's been used in TV tons of times, but there's that Zhang Tzu dreamed he was a butterfly. Was he the butterfly dreaming he was Zhang Tzu, or was he Zhang Tzu dreaming he was the butterfly?
Yeah.
Which is it's classic. And, and Picard is basically like, lucky you, you're free. And that freedom sort of represents consciousness and stuff. And then there's that scene about where they talk. We already talked about this when we were reviewing that scene, so I don't really have anything to add.
I think, I was just going to say, like, even along the lines of the butterfly, it's been used for a long time also as a symbol of transformation, of going from one thing to another, which
and there's
sense.
Something about that transformation that is ontologically fundamental for Zhang Tzu.
Yeah. So, so then, you've got that conversation. And also we noted in the Will Wheaton kind of next week or whatever, the little hints to the episode this week, that Agnes watches Soji scan her eye at the door to get in to talk to Picard. So
that comes up in the scene right after.
Yeah, that was, I don't know, I guess Soji again didn't notice.
But
Agnes in the background.
An important thing for the timing, though, is that Agnes does take a look at them making the beacon there. And I did, and then we see the opening sequence. I did sort of throw in this one shot of the opening sequence, because I thought it would be relevant.
It's very relevant now.
Very relevant in the episode, but we don't have to talk too much about that right now. Okay, then.
What we thought would be symbolic may not have been.
And Steven just made a point where we were talking about butterflies, is that the way the golem was visually used, it was very cocoonish.
Yes.
So there was some foreshadowing there about, cycles of life that a character like Picard could go through.
maybe. And I want to also note this episode was directed by Akiva Goldsmith, who is one of the show
writers.
I think she did this episode.
Oh.
And I also, with the opening, I just made a note. I still really love the opening credits. I think they're really good. And now even more fitting. So, yeah. So next scene, what's he doing here? Is he opening a can of beans, I think?
No, he's setting up some, they were like some sort of liquid bomb stuff. And he's like, I'm going to go bomb some flowers. And the rest is like, what?
They were molecular solvent grenades.
Yeah. And she's like, what? Why are you bombing flowers? And he's like, it's my plan.
Why are you bombing flowers? Yeah, I'd ask the same question, to be honest. If someone just said, like, oh, I've got these grenades for some flowers, I'd be like, leave the dang flowers alone, man. But anyway, he's like, no, these flowers are like... No.
These are flowers we need to bomb. And then, but what's sort of more interesting here is that this ends up being the last scene between the two of them.
Yeah.
In their lives.
Yeah.
And there's just sort of this moment where she's like... she seems to say, like, why do you want to leave again? He just wants to pick up a bunch of bombs and then go out and fight more. And she's just like, why you want to leave again? And he's like, I've got to finish this mission. Like, I did this. I found this place. I'm actually done something. And then he mentions this thing. One, their parents died to do this. So presumably their parents were in the Vakvash and they were killed by some synths. And this would have been before 14 years ago, presumably. There.
Yeah, he said something about, let me see, about family disgrace as well.
Yeah, he said that he himself was sort of kicked out of the Vakvash.
Yeah, so he's got something to prove.
Like that. It was a sort of unclear. I guess there's more backstory.
It was unclear.
That exists somewhere in a writer's head about the backstory between them. But he's out to prove himself, and she's like, well, okay, I'm going to stay here and get the Borg sensors back up so I could maybe help the fleet come.
Yeah, the weapon systems.
I don't. To me, neither of their motivations make a lot of sense. In particularly the bombing of the flowers. I don't know how he thinks he's going to.
Flowers.
Yeah, right. At this point, he thinks he's going to bomb flowers. I don't know how he thinks he's going to bomb the flowers. And the flowers, to me, didn't seem like a huge deterrent to like 200 Romulan warbirds.
Well, and they didn't turn out to be.
No, they didn't turn out to be. And I don't think. Why would he think they would be? Like, I don't think he's worried about that. Like.
Nice.
But I mean, plot-wise, it makes more sense.
So did he not have the plan all along to blow up the beacon? Like, is that not what he was really thinking? But in this case, he's like, no, it's for the flowers.
In the scene, and it's also they think about blowing up the beacon in the next scene, like he's in. It's not clear how they know about some of this stuff, like how he actually knows about the beacon, or how he even really knows about the. Like, is his version of the admonition that he would have heard about make it clear that they're trying to make a beacon? Because I don't see why that would in any way. And I'm not even...
Yeah, sometimes the show leaves us hanging even worse on how characters know certain things.
I think that exactly happens in sort of the next scene, and I'll talk about it when we get there. The last thing is that there's sort of this last look he gives her as he leaves. He's really... They do a zoom in, and I sort of thought this was the better shot of it, but he looks really hurt, and... Then we just see him leaving, and she just like kind of looks away.
Is this supposed to be one of those like the character knew this was a last goodbye? Is that what we're supposed to be seeing here?
I don't know. When I first watched it, so I usually watch them starting in the morning, and I try to watch it again later. But when I first watched it, I didn't really catch any of this stuff. But sort of when I rewatched it to do the screenshots, I noticed it was a much bigger, more important scene because it was their last scene.
Yeah. So it was, but it's always kind of one of those things where, why does a character know that? He would have no idea in this case that it would be. Maybe he's planning in this case, like in this situation, he's planning to sacrifice himself, or he thinks. But it was their last scene together, so yeah.
And Stephen was just saying he's willing, that we're right, that him understanding the motivation and creating the beacon at this point doesn't make any sense, but he's willing to suspend belief about that, and I am too. And I'll talk more about that in the next scene. So the next scene, we have sort of an entire scene just about this gadget that
my favorite part of the episode. I'm being sarcastic. I hope everyone knows that.
I thought it was odd that they put, because this was sort of the second part of the last episode. Every sort of time they put into something needs to make sense and actually be important. And when I was watching this, I was like, wow, they're really setting this up to be an important plot device, because they're spending an entire scene just about how it works. Basically, with Raffi's sort of, hey, just use your imagination. If you just sort of think about what you want, it's smart enough to like replicate the right machinery to do it, but then it also seems to sort of be magic because then it very instantly like fixes everything and then the ship's all fine. You pointed out, yeah.
Can I talk about this for a second? Because, like, can someone please explain to me somewhere who has a theory on why this was part of the episode or the show? What the heck was the point of this thing? Like, everything that it did could have been done without it by somebody, maybe just like, for instance, Rios is like, oh, I figured out how to fix the ship. Like, or the thing we talked about, how it's used in a later scene to kind of amplify the Picard maneuver, and we'll talk about that when it comes up. But what the heck? Like, I hate this thing.
Steven says it's a PLOT device. It fixes whatever the writers want. It
yeah, but my God, like
payoff of it. I'll bring.
No, like there's plot devices often used in shows and movies. Yeah, plot devices are part of storytelling. But what the heck were they thinking?
Point, you definitely thought there was going to be a payoff to it.
Why wasn't there a genie? Like, why wasn't there just a genie in this episode?
Deus Ex Machina. Well, there is one thing it does. Like we're saying, that could have been explained easier in other ways.
Brings people together.
Near later on the episode, there's a part where Picard's sort of getting sick. And I noticed that this thing was still on a chair on sort of the bridge of the Lust Arena. And I was like thinking that they'd use it somehow to help Picard at that point. And I don't know if that was almost intentional. Like that was sort of the writers like doing another feint where you think this device is going to be used this way, but like, no, we're going to do something else, because there's still been a question about how that's going to play out and stuff. But I don't think it is. It wasn't prominent enough. The only other thing I did want to say about this fancy device is that the way it was used here reminded me a lot of the exocomps from TNG Quality of Life, which is a great episode, and there were really interesting, a lot of interesting themes to compare with, you know, the synths here. And I would love to point out that the exocomps were willing to sacrifice. One of them was willing to sacrifice itself to save the other exocomps, and then all the exocomps were willing to work together and sacrifice themselves to save everybody. So the exocomps were kind of like Soji, but better and faster at making moral decisions.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, sure. I don't know. I didn't, and it didn't have a personality. Like the exocomps kind of were like, they had sentience or like some kind of, this thing was just like, looked like an ocarina. You put your fingers in it and then you make a wish on it and it fixes it. I would have preferred what you're saying if it had been some kind of version of a sentient life.
There, maybe.
That's something like that. Anyway, I don't want to fixate too much on that because it was honestly my least favorite part of the end of this show and my least favorite part of this episode. I hated that thing. I think it's so stupid. Why? If I was in the writer's room and someone was like, what about a magic thing? I'd be like, get the heck out. Anyway.
All right, so this is the only shot I have from this scene. It's just sort of an interplay between they're working on, I think they're almost done, the golem. She says something about, hey, you've got to like download the synth that was killed, Saga or whatever, I forget her name, but you gotta go somewhere to download it. And then she does that sort of thing where she's like trying to talk herself into something, just like when she was about to kill Maddox. And
she says, I'm not their mother, asshole, as he like walks away, because he says something like, wow, it's really amazing that you're willing to do this, like
stab like, everyone in the back and like sacrifice yourself and kill all life in the universe.
Yeah, and to be honest, even her character turn, her 5 character turns, none of them have made any sense to me. She doesn't have the motivation to do 90% of what she does, except for maybe, she's just like has a few nuts bolts loose in her head or something. But no, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think her wanting to help Picard in this situation makes sense.
It's the character turn that doesn't make sense. Yeah. Her motivation to help Picard's fine.
But I don't think this was a character turn. I think she was always on the side of the Picard. She was never really on the side of the synths. Remember, she earlier killed Maddox, and like she was more on that side. It was just when they started arresting Picard, she was just like, don't arrest me, I'll help this guy. And then because she was smart enough, or at least like, you know, thinking enough at that point that she could help save Picard if she wasn't also locked up.
It doesn't make sense. Like that's true, but I guess maybe what I'm saying is her motivation or how they play her out and how she does things to me.
Steven said that even at this point, he didn't trust Agnes. Thought she still might.
Well, that's the thing, and there's no reason to trust her. And I don't think she trusts herself. She's a weird character. She's just kind of like doing weird stuff.
She's the most
people, but then killing people.
They've touched a little bit on Raffi, but in a way, she's the most like anti like most Barclay-like, the least likely to be a commanding crew member of a team.
Well,
Enterprise
certainly
D.
that. Although I have a feeling next season she'll be like captain of her own ship for no reason.
All right. So the next scene.
Yeah, bud.
Yeah, Narek's throwing rocks. That's how he like introduces himself to the Lusarena. That he doesn't sneak in. He just starts throwing rocks. He's like, "What's up, guys? Throwing rocks." And then she's like, "What do you want?" And he's like, "I'm
Well,
just here to save the universe." So they sort of get in, and he
well,
sort of like spills his plan.
yeah, I need to say something about this. Two things. Okay, so before Narek shows up, Raffi and Rios are talking and using the magic wand, and they hear this like banging, and Rios goes, "I've heard that sound before." So he's had people throw rocks at his ship before.
Oh, I forgot about that. That is a weird line.
I don't understand that. Like,
Oh,
so
yeah,
he's heard the noise of rocks
from the previous scene that we're in, where after the machine fixed everything, and he goes, Raffi's like, "What was that?" And he goes like, "Something that doesn't make any sense."
Right. I was going to bring up that line too, which I wrote down. He says, yeah, she says, "What's happening?" And he says, "Nothing that makes any sense." Okay. So is that your way, writers, of making us as an audience be like, I'm fine with this then, because he just explained it to me as like, don't worry, nothing makes any sense. Anyway, back to the rocks throwing.
Or even back to
so yeah, Narek's throwing rock at the ship. And I just wanted to bring up also that after he throws the rocks, they say, "You're not going to hurt us with rocks." And he says, "Yeah, but I've got this molecular solvent grenade." And anyway, and then they're like, "Okay, come and talk to us then."
And so then he basically tries to convince them that, hey, you got to help me stop them from creating this beacon, which he knows about now.
So another character that should not be trusted at all is suddenly trusted.
More than that, like none of their motivations here don't make a lot of sense. The fact that they know about the beacon, but even if he's coming here and saying all these things, from their perspective, he's part of the people who attacked Mars and killed thousands of people. Their reaction is that I'm going to work with you to fight these guys to understand this beacon based on a second-hand version of the admonition that one of the synths got to know how to create the beacon.
Yeah,
their motivation here does. It's one of those. It's another one of those scenes where their motivation for what they're going to do next makes sense to the viewer, because we know that the climax of this episode is all around this beacon choice that Soji has to make, and they got to stop the beacon. We understand that as the viewer. There's no reason for them to even know that, or if they did know about it, to be motivated in that way.
And then believe Narek in telling them this, because he's been a bad guy the whole episode. And also, lost my train of thought. But yeah, no,
Steven points out that he still actually kind of liked Narek in this episode, and I sort of agree. Narek seemed like what we saw from Narek in this episode. I kind of was a more most of what we Narek has been that sort of pretty dark relationship he has with Sochi, as sort of, which has always been sort of a metaphor for a bad relationship, or it was a bad relationship, but is symbolic for that type of bad relationship, or emblematic. And in this episode, he sort of was just like a down and out Ronin outsider who wants to go on this mission that he thinks is going to like finish the mission that he needs to save everyone with. So I kind of like the character. And to be honest, like I was saying, this is one of their motivations here is one of the biggest plot holes. But at the same time, as a viewer, I was like, okay, at least it's getting us to the next scene, and I actually like where this scene's going. So I was kind of cool with it.
Okay, yeah, 100%.
And
yeah, I like Narek. I like the idea of what's going on, but it just doesn't add up how it came about. And I guess to me, it also creates this character, Narek, who is just so wishy-washy on his motivations. Like, 1 minute he's like doing this thing for this reason, and now, but it also shows, I guess, and this is a good thing, that Narek really has never been evil. And we talked about this before. He's just wanting, in some ways, to stop something really bad from happening, which I think is good.
In the previous scene, like we were talking, there was something about him trying to prove himself to his sister or to his family.
And that's why, though, it doesn't add up. His motivations or his actions right now don't really add up with when he tried to kill Soji, because that then, like, that was a really evil thing to do. I feel like even when he tried to kill Soji, if they had made it added some subtlety where he kind of really tried to save her, well, you know what I mean? Like, he still wasn't, because if he wanted to just kill her to try to stop this from happening, but now he's willing to work with people and be kind of friendly about it just because he knows that what could happen is bad. I just would have rather seen his character consistent on that arc as far as not doing anything super extremely evil, but just kind of trying to stop this this AI from
So at the
attacking.
end of this scene, Elnor shows up and he's got a sword and he's like, "You're that jerk guy," and they said, "We gotta re-talk about it." Now that I remember, I think in the previous scene, no, that doesn't add up. I was gonna say when Narek first leaves the Borg cube, um, do we see Elnor sort of following him?
Yes, we
Right.
do. Yeah, so he
So it
leaves
adds up that
when
he
he's
shows
talking
up
to.
here. What sort of a more
It adds
interesting
up. It
scene?
adds up.
Yeah, well, he just is like, what's going on? It cuts back to them in another scene. So yeah,
Right.
right after this. So I just wanted to. So it does. So this scene sort of cuts over to here, and this is her. What she does is she basically is taking her eye out, which is another sort of thing we've seen before on this show.
Yeah, so it makes sense, I guess, in this because she saw that you scan the eye, and then it's like, okay, this one doesn't need its other eyes, so I'm going to use it.
Yeah. So, but then they go back to them, and I guess it's been overnight because it's nighttime now, and they have a really nice sort
Where
of
are they?
fire. It's right outside the La Serena. I think you can see the La
Oh, okay.
Serena's like port right there. So they're just having a nice sort of fire chat, and they have a little
Why?
fire like telling ghost stories, and to convince them to go on this mission. Narek talks about their sort of mythology, and sort of like the final version of they call it the Gamadon, which is Gamadon basically their eschatology, uh, they even I think one of the characters that might be Rios is Valhalla / Judgment Day. It's a little quite a bit, or sorry, not Valhalla, Ragnarok, Judgment Day. It's quite a bit more like Ragnarok, and he talks about the Jahala Ghul. I wrote it down, but there's these two sisters. There are these demons that summon this big destruction. Is the way
Yeah,
it's going
yeah,
to
and
be.
they go into a decent amount of detail with
Yeah,
this mythology, which
there's
I
a
really liked
drum.
actually.
One of the season has a
Yeah, she beats
drum,
a drum with skulls.
which is
The other sister blows a horn. Um, and she beats the drum so much with the skulls that her heart bursts.
yeah, it
Um,
sounds like mythologies we've heard.
it sounds like mythology. Now, in this scene, also, we have Elnor saying in the beginning, "Why should we trust you? I don't like you." And I was like, "Yeah, thank you, Elnor." So, but anyway, so they tell the story, which is actually, oh yeah, and then also Narek has this moment where Raffi says, "Yeah, we know about this story," and he's like, "Do you know about this part of it? And do you know about this part of it?" And they're like, "Yeah, okay, we didn't know that much about it. Like, relax."
Does that convince you to come on this mission?
And then in the end, though, very quickly, I just want to say that they say, "You believe this, that it's the end days prophecy kind of thing?" And he says, "No, I believe it's history, and history repeats itself." And then it cuts to a wide shot, and there's lightning in the sky.
Oh, okay, I didn't get that shot, but yeah, and that was one
No,
thing.
no, it was quick. It was quick. I just thought it was
That
hilarious.
was one thing. That's a very common trope in television, and we've seen it before in Star Trek. And two things is that sort of prophecies. There was an episode of DS9, The Three Vipers, where there's like this prophecy that's going to happen, and then it doesn't seem to happen. But in the end, like if you reinterpret the prophecy, it might have happened. And there's a really common sort of trope is that mythology is always really history, euhemerism on some core, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and Schliemann finally found Troy, thus proving that all mythologies are actually rooted in history. And I've never really liked that idea. I've been critical of that idea in general, but I thought it got me thinking is that first of all, the way they revealed this sort of the twins and the mythology around this was really convoluted and annoying. I didn't like the
Mhm.
games we had to play about it. I think we should have just heard a simplified version of it from day one, and if it was then, it was then. If it was going to be told, nice place to tell it.
Yeah, what's the benefit of waiting so long? If anything, it just made us confused for a
Yeah,
longer
the
amount of
whole twin
time.
thing was super confusing and super
The twin thing,
unnecessary.
yeah.
But the other thing I just wanted to say is it would have been super awesome to be we are developing here a completely unique society that sort of they at one point they call it like an advanced highly evolved synth society. I think Agnes did that. But either way, it's like a new society of these synth children's. What type of mythology would they have created that would reflect something about their culture? Because maybe they would have a mythology and they would know something about Data or they'd know something about Picard because they all have this like sort of like uh, relationship or this sort of like genealogy with Data who knows something about Picard. So what type of mythology would they have created? We didn't really explore anything about them. The only one we really Sutra is really the only one we see interacting or talking. And anyway, that's just my thing about the mythologies that I feel would have been a cool thing to sort of look at. I keep on saying this. I'd like to do an episode maybe eventually about just all the mythological themes and
Mm.
mythologies and human mythologies and world mythologies and
Yeah, there's
stuff
been a
that's been
lot
touched in
for
this.
sure.
And it'd be cool to still do that, but that's would have been interesting.
No, yeah, we should. But I overall I kind of like the scene. I am now questioning why they had to be sitting around a campfire outside the ship, but whatever. I'd want to do the same, I guess. We've got a few comments coming in. I think Steve's just saying a few things, which is awesome. Thank you, Steve. Just kind of discussing the different characters and everyone. We were talking last night about how now Data and Spock have more relatives and offshoots than any other character that nobody knew about. All these characters that nobody knew about. So
Yeah.
soon, Alton
Something
soon.
about those characters that they keep on having long lost brothers.
Well, I think what it is who are two of the
they're the most popular.
I think Spock and Spock and Data are two of the best characters all time from Star Trek.
TV
arguably.
all time.
Absolutely. So why not have them be? Yeah. Well, sorry, I got distracted there. I think there's like a call coming in or something.
Yeah, so our guest star who was just contacting us, so we might maybe after we're done our recap here, which I'm going a lot slower than I was anticipating we'd go, but I guess there always is way more.
Well, there's a lot to talk about.
I did want to sort of spread out to another episode, maybe talking about some of the stuff, but we'll do that. We'll do that next.
So maybe we talked about this scene. Can you cut to what do you have next? Because I think it's what I probably want to talk about next.
But there's a quick shot of
it is.
Commodore
Yeah.
coming.
So no, it's good. So I don't know if it's just me, but for some reason, everything Commodore O does seems super campy and like not believable. And I don't know if it's, again, like I'm just missing something, or she just is trying so hard to play this like badass. And so she says like, our great work is nearly at an end in this moment. And I'm just like, I don't know. I'm not huge on like any of the lines she's delivering.
I wrote down one of her lines. It's later in the episode, but I'd probably forget to mention it then. Let's begin planet sterilization pattern number 5.
Ah, yes, I wrote that down too. It was
5?
literally like, why can't it just be begin sterilizing planet? Like it's like one of those situations where again the writers.
That's a classic Star Trek thing. It's always like evasive pattern.
Not in this
alpha,
scenario, though.
beta,
Oh my
7,
God.
And...
Well, then say that. Say like sterilization pattern alpha beta, like not like number 5.
But no, she's a really one-dimensional
Remember also
character.
Mambo number 5.
We'll talk about her again with her later interplay, where she sort of leaves her resolution that is problematic.
Yeah, it was number 5, Mambo number 5. So maybe the sterilization is just to play that song for the whole planet until they all just kill.
They all just leave.
Yeah, that's my theory on that one. But I'm not. Yeah, honestly, all of her scenes in this episode where it would cut back to her, she'd be on her ship, she'd say something like a mustache twirling villain. I just always was like, ugh, okay. Like I wanted to. Honestly, I'd like her more if there was more. Somehow they show more depth. Somehow they show more of a like. She's not just again like a villain that has no. She's just evil.
Super one-dimensional.
Anyway.
Just and we'll talk maybe a little bit when we see the fleets. But even like the fleet doesn't seem that scary because it's so homogenous and static in the way that they portray the Romulan warbirds. Which is
it would have been cool.
Romulan warbirds usually are cool.
Cool, and it would have been kind of cool to see her maybe communicate with some of her other ships. Like maybe we cut to the ship and we see some like Jacques Vache on the ship being like, Commodore, what do we, what's our next move or something? And they're like,
I think we do see a couple of Jacques Vache on the ship at some point. I don't know if any shots.
Yeah, anyway.
So then we're back to the La Serena, and they do sort of like one of those cut back and forth. We're going to go on a mission thing.
I was just going to say that.
Which I thought worked. This is the first time for me it actually worked as an editing style. But he basically is taking those bombs out, and he's like, we need to put this in we need to put the bombs in, we need to smuggle the bombs in. What can we smuggle them in?
So they cut it back and forth like a heist movie, and they're kind of like talking about it, and then we're showing them do it. But they're building up to like how they're going to, there we go. So they're kind of talking about through, and he's like, well, we're going to walk in because you guys are going to take me in as if I'm captured by you. So like, oh yeah, cool, no problem. But that's fine. I didn't have an issue with that. Their weapons are interesting. I kind of wanted to see them use these in some way because they look cool. I don't know if this is like a weird stab.
They look like they're from Atlantis.
Yeah, they do, which makes sense, I think, right? Because kind of the synth colony would almost be like a weird Atlantis.
Yeah.
So,
and it was portrayed like that in the show because everyone's like, "Where is it?" Again,
Yeah.
it comes back to I would have loved if they shuffled up the way they did the episodes and gave us an entire episode just exploring the synth, the city, what their culture was like, what some of the characters were like, why would they actually make these decisions, why they leave, why they say all of them never want to talk and exclusively leave Sutra or Soji to make all the important decisions for them. That's sort of like counter consciousness in my view.
Yeah, they're just kind of a bunch of mindless characters, which they shouldn't be. Like they're all their own person that could. And I understand that they're being led by, I guess fear and whatever.
Yeah, there's a line somewhere. I think Picard says that to somebody about how they're.
Yeah, Picard talks about that quite a bit, which makes sense because he's against
fear is an incompetent teacher. To be alive is also to have responsibility as well as have rights.
And I like that. I like tackling the idea of fear.
Yeah, I don't know where this from. But anyway, he brings in his soccer ball. And one of the guys there wasn't really a very good quick shot of it. But basically one of them's like, "You play?"
Yeah, and he says, "I love the game." Okay. It's fine. It was cute. It was kind of funny. I feel like that's a Star Trek-y thing. I feel like I can see that happening on like a previous episode or something where they use a soccer ball to sneak it in. It's kind of fun.
So then the next scene is when we actually see Agnes rescuing Picard. And Picard sort of
using the eyeball and scanning.
Picard sort of like he sort of hesitates as he gets up, and he doesn't really wake up right away. So it's sort of the first.
I thought that was great.
It's also one of the first sort of foreshadowing that he's sort of deteriorating.
Yeah, but I love how he played that because she goes, "Are you?" And he's like, "Still here." And he like sits up.
Where would I be?
Well, right, and he knows she's kind of asking like, "Are you dead?" And he's like, "No, I'm still."
All right, and so the next scene we get something that it's one of those sort of like characters suddenly change their mind completely. So basically, he finally decodes the video of the one who was killed was used by Sutra to like do all this stuff. And he finds out that she conveniently in the shot, presumably she'd know this, who knows, but she helped them kill. And he suddenly sees the light and sees what actually is going on. Now, obviously, the problem is that if he actually believed that it made sense to kill all life in the galaxy to save the synths, then he would think it would be okay to kill one synth. Or like, if he actually was committed to this view, this wouldn't be convincing.
I agree.
It was one of those things where the characters his character either had to be killed or to do this for him to go ahead. Remember I said I thought he was going to be killed by Sutra because of the way he's sort of done the tropes of sort of been in that type of like betrayal character. But for him to sort of make this last minute character motivation change made it so he can be around, which I prefer, but...
Yeah, and it's another one of those things where
I like that shot.
To create drama, the writers kind of did one thing and then quickly switched it to kind of ease up on the drama or show that like no everything's fine, and so I feel like they did this with Soong's character, Spiner's character here, where it was like no he's a bad guy, but then suddenly he's not because he saw that Sutra was the one that actually killed the synth. But like you said, like that would not be enough to kind of all of a sudden be like, oh well, now I'm not for the synths being
destroying
protected by
everything in the galaxy.
Yeah.
To me, I just feel like the whole thing would have worked better if it wasn't killing all life in the galaxy. If it was a little subtler than that. I mean, I know it's a little ambiguous what is going on, but they try to make it pretty clear that it's something like killing all life in the galaxy. They say that, maybe they don't mean that, they don't know how apocalyptic it is. I think it would have been better if it was a better sort of analogy for the atomic bomb or something like that. And
yeah, so sorry.
So the next scene is so Picard and Agnes go to the
Agnes.
Lust Arena. So they completely switched spots. It's a it was a sort of an awkward editing, like now they're there, but the other people are at the other spot, and they didn't see each other on the way. Sort of makes sense because they were sneaking out the other way, but they very quickly get there. But obviously, it's important for him to be here for the next scene, so whatever. So he takes the captain's seat finally, and he's like, "I'm gonna fly this ship. Let's see if I can figure this out." And there's sort of a kind of I like the dynamic between him and Agnes in this scene. I'll just say that.
Mind it. So he's saying, yeah, they're 7 minutes away. We got to stall them.
You gotta stall the Romulans, yeah. That's his mission.
Got to stall the Romulans. And she also asks, and you're probably going to talk about this, like, how are we going to, change the mind of the synths, or how are we going to stop them? And he says, well, they're like children. This is when he does the line about the fear is an incompetent teacher, and we teach them the way that children learn. That's how we'll do this. We'll teach them the way children learn by example.
Right.
That's what kind of whoops.
And so he's going to be heroic and go on and willing to sacrifice himself to make the right choice to save everybody.
Yeah.
All right. So back down on the planet, people are the synths who never really say much are gathering. Also, our crew gathers there too. I
like how they took the time to add a few twins in that shot. Like, go back. There's like a few characters that are.
Yeah, they've always
we've
always seen twins, and then there's a twin of the one who died there too.
Well, there's definitely a bunch that aren't twins. But
yeah,
anyway.
and again, the twin thing.
It doesn't really
not get that digression. So this is the end of this character. Basically, there's another shot here. Yeah. Basically, Dr. Soong has this fail-safe little scanner button thing that turns her off.
Right, and I think I talked to Stephen earlier, and he was saying, like, how did she not know this existed? Did she not know it existed? I mean, it makes sense to have a failsafe. I'm a little disappointed that this is the end of her character because, again, she becomes a plot device.
Yeah,
and not a character.
Not a character. She ended up not having much. She ended up being just a physical representation of one of the choices that Sochi is trying to make. She was just like she basically, how like there's the evil genie and the good genius. The devil and the angel on your shoulders. She was just like the devil on Soji's shoulder that we got to visually see, and that's why she was so evil. Because she wasn't actually a real character.
She wasn't really a character, no. And it's really disappointing because we talked, I think, about predictions, and we said, I think we talked about her maybe potentially just being completely evil. But I know I wanted to see some form of turning point, or I don't know. I don't ever like a character just being evil, and there's a lot of those in this show. I mean, basically Narissa, Commodore O, now Sutra. Like, there's a lot of characters who just need to drive the plot forward by being the bad guy. And I was sad because Sutra certainly seemed evil, but in my mind, I was like, no, I'm sure she has some redeeming quality or something that. Anyway, but they just threw that out. He shuts her down, and
I think
is like,
because we touched on this with Data having an off switch and stuff like that. But having an off switch that maybe they don't even know about, or perhaps he's been pre-programmed to not know about it, and be blind spotted about it, is a problem if we're supposed to believe they have their own independent consciousness and their own independent choice. Because if at any point Dr. Soong or whoever decides that they don't like their choices, they no longer are free agents. They no longer have agency. So I think there is some agency issues there, but we can deal with that.
And Stephen brought up a point also that, again, they just kind of glazed over, which is when Soong does this, he's doing it in front of all the other synths. So how come none of them were like, hey.
And he doesn't even talk to the other synths and say like, hey, you guys were behind this plan to like do a really bad thing, but it was based on false pretenses.
That could have been super quick. He shuts her down. The synths start to revolt, and he does it quick.
None of the other synths talk much anyway. Like, they're not really characters.
That could have been, as I was saying, that could have been done really quickly, where they just say, "Hey, like, why did you shut her down?" And he says, "You guys were being led astray." Blah blah blah. And maybe Soji just says like something. Either way, they just decided to have him shut her down in front of a bunch of synths. And I think the thing that's weird is like part of what the synths are fighting for is to have autonomy and to be able to make their own decisions. And then they just see a human shut down a synth right in front of them without asking her, and like literally controlling her. So clearly he has this ability to do this to any synth there. Like, wouldn't they all be like, wait a minute, this ain't cool.
So there's a shot back up here, and they're like, so what's the plan? And he's like, we'll do something, and they know the Romulans are coming. And then back
Yeah,
down
she's
here,
speaking out at him, and he said something like, "Can you just let me fly the ship? Because I'm trying to figure
yeah,
it
and
out
then
right
I
now."
didn't include the shot because it wasn't interesting, but you can see the ship kind of like awkwardly go up. So down on
Yeah, yeah.
the planet, I do have this is the shot I have of the soccer ball. They all sort of like get into the position, and then Rios tries to like throw up the soccer ball and get this bomb system to go up, but I don't really have a.
This, or is this something they replicated?
That's not clear, but either way, it doesn't work out. Soji
Okay.
herself, so Soji basically prevents it from. She catches
She
it
just
and then
throws it
throws
up
it
in the
away.
sky.
I don't have a good shot of it, and that's the end of that. So Soji is now the one in control on the planet. So it's all about her
Yeah,
agency and
yeah,
her choice, and that's sort of, I think, really the more important thing about them deactivating Sutra is it sets up Soji to be the one who makes a choice. And
sure. And again, I'll go back
back
to
to
say that they could have simplified and had it be Soji the whole
yeah.
time. And when Soji gets to the planet, she talks to other synths, and they convince her to be a little bit evil for a while, and that would have been cool instead of having Sutra be this like only 100% evil character.
Yeah, like we were saying, she's not a real character. She's just an aspect of Soji. So in the next scene, we have the confrontation between two characters, Seven of Nine, and so this scene cuts back to some other scenes. So we're going to go to another scene and come back to it. But basically, there's a confrontation between Seven of Nine and Narissa, and I thought it was pretty cool. It's one of those things where you're in your movie and you sort of have a sense over like there's gonna have the final battle and who's gonna fight who, and the dynamic. And just like Ragnarok is the ancient Norse mythology has a great sort of who fights who sort of final battle setup. That's pretty interesting. One thing that Narissa does say something about how attractive or compliments the looks of Seven of Nine in her sort of very awkward way. That
Yeah, but says like you would be attractive if it wasn't for the
oh
fact that
yeah,
you're
that was a point. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
yeah, well, that's just I think kind of following up on what you said. Yeah, it was basically like you would be attractive. I think she's saying you would be attractive if you weren't an
half
export,
breed. She
basically.
says half breed.
Half breed.
Which I
That's
thought
it.
was it
Yeah.
because we hadn't. I think we sort of knew the Romulans were kind of racist towards the export, but we knew
Mhm.
Romulans were kind of racist against everybody. They were kind of themselves very xenophobic and that,
Yeah.
and not all Romulans are Vakvash, this cult. So this is really the first time where they introduce this idea of a Borg being a half breed in the view of the Vakvash, and to me that's sort of
Yeah.
interesting because it doesn't really follow to me that someone who has augmented. I don't know. We're getting to examine that another time, perhaps, but
Sure.
it was a thing. So then we
It was a thing.
see.
Why she said it doesn't really make sense. Now, did you don't have a shot of?
No, it cuts back and forth.
Okay.
There's a bunch of scenes here. So all the Romulan ships arrive, and actually the editing for the rest of this part of the climax of the episode until sort of the resolution of the episode, there's a lot of back and forth stuff between what's going on in space and what's going on the different parts of the planet. So the Romulan ships arrive, the flowers set up to fight, and during this fight, the La Serena with the Picard and Agnes come up, and we sort of see all that stuff happening.
What the heck are they going to do? They can't help this situation.
But I don't know. I probably have another shot later. But basically, they cut through the flowers pretty easily, as we anticipated, thought they would.
Yeah, I think I wrote down like, does anyone want fried?
Yeah, and then back down on the planet, we sort of have the final resolution. So there's some action, some fight scenes
And
going
what does
on.
she say in the end?
7 of 9 and Narissa. Oh, I thought you were going to say. What did she say?
Well, I was asking you. I wanted you to say the final line because it was pretty epic.
Oh, I don't know.
We planned this out. You're supposed to say the final line. She says, "This is for Hugh."
Right. She says this is for Hugh. And at the time, I'm glad they mentioned Hugh.
Me too.
I
Me
sort
too.
of felt a little burnt by them not mentioning Hugh again, so I thought that was pretty cool.
There was a little tiny sliver of vindication. It was very small, but having her say this is for Hugh and kick her for Sparta.
Yeah, she's definitely dead. She's not coming back.
Well, Steve just said she's probably still alive somehow.
That
So,
sounds it. It
but
was a pretty
it certainly
conclusive
seems like,
death, I think.
yeah. But you said that about saying goodbye to Riker, so
Well, he didn't die.
I don't
Seven of
trust
Nine
your
didn't kick him out.
assessment of.
Oh yeah,
I don't trust your assessment of conclusive moments. But
no, fair enough.
yeah, so I liked it. This is for Hugh. It felt good to have a little bit of that happen. So anyway,
So
moving
cutting back to
on.
the La Serena, they're like, so the Roman ships were all arrived. They're like, how is one ship going to do anything to distract them? Because right now, Picard's really planning is like to sacrifice himself to slow down the Romans so that the Federation ship can arrive. And they're like, what can we do? And then she says something about like, too bad we don't have a Picard maneuver. Wait a second, there was a Picard maneuver. So they come out with like,
Mm-hmm.
but, and he's like, there's no way the Picard maneuver will work against a bunch of
It's not
different
going to
ships,
work.
right? Because it's a perspective thing. The warp speed makes it seem like there's two of them. And then she's like, but wait, I found this ocarina.
And why does had she been presented like, okay, the ocarina was presented originally to
Raffi.
who?
It was just Raffi, and then
and the person, the android at the time said,
I think Rio sort of joins them, but Raffi wasn't even really part of it. It was Raffi, Picard,
but
and that
Agnes,
one android.
Right, Agnes had never seen this thing to our knowledge. So in this moment, she picks it up, knows what it is, knows how to use it, even though Rios needed some coaching on how to use it, and then
uses it to do
show,
a super Picard maneuver.
Yeah, in order to show how it's going to work, she creates multiple versions of her smiling face. So we see what's about to happen. And honestly, the scene right before this where she kicks Narissa down the hole and says, this is for Hugh, I was like, yes, this episode's getting good. Right after it, this scene happened, and I was like, oh, some stupid bit of like kind of comedy for no reason.
I didn't mind the visual as much, and I liked the Picard maneuver being used. But the problem is, like we were saying, the technobabble for how them to use a special Picard maneuver where they can warp and look like they're in a bunch of places. They don't need that for that. I was saying they could have had a throwaway line about Rios doing something with the La Serena's hollow projectors so that he has all of his holograms everywhere. Like, it's technobabble. They could have had it done some other way.
Yeah, they could have used that. That would have been
the awkward setup to pull it off. And it almost would have been maybe cooler if it was less technobabble and more Picard maneuver bravado that made it happen.
Sure, I would have loved that. So for me, please, next season, if you're in the writer's room and someone suggests a wand that can, create many versions of a ship, please work to create solutions, not just have them thrown as well as multiple versions of a ship. So I think you mentioned something really cool, which is that Rios on his ship has a bunch of holographic versions of himself. It would have been super cool if they somehow were like, can we manipulate that to create multiple holographic versions of our ship? That would have been freaking cool, because we already saw that there was something on the ship being used to create multiple versions of somebody. So
yeah, it could have been just technobabble, but it could have been technobabble that was more established with La Serena, and didn't need the ocarina, La Serena ocarina.
Yeah, I still
they
have.
rhyme. That's where they sync up.
There you go. That's why it's there. Okay, now I accept it.
So the next scene, Picard calls down Soji, and he's and you can tell right away Soji still sort of is sympathetic to Picard in some reason, and we sort of saw that subtly in the scene where they talked at the start of the episode. And he's basically in this one he says that he's going to he's going to sacrifice himself to prove that he was willing to do something for her. I don't remember.
Right.
If you did any notes specifically about what he said, but basically he said like I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna risk myself to stop the Romulans. You don't
did I write anything
to the line of I'll slow down the Romulans. You don't need to do this. You don't need to.
Yeah, it's the same thing he's kind of been saying all along, which is don't become the monster they think you are. You have a choice. Don't let fear control you. And of course he's setting the example, as he said earlier he would do, by saying I'm willing to sacrifice myself as a human for a synth to prove that we can coexist.
And Agnes too, of course.
We can coexist with Agnes, who will just maybe on a whim kill one of us at a certain point, but hopefully not.
So this is
before or after the Federation?
So
no, but okay, so they haven't shown up.
So right now they need a lot, and that was the one thing. There's the entire space battle scene, maybe it was a price thing. Maybe they didn't want to put as much money into the space battles, so they just used the same ships over and over again. But the space battles seem to be just a bunch of homogenized repeats of the same ship. And this is what the Ocarina souped up Picard maneuver does. Is creates a bunch of that, and it's enough basically for Commodore O to say like, wait a second, stop planet sterilization pattern number 5. We need to re-aim our weapons at all these ships first. So it buys them time.
It's too bad they didn't use sterilization program number 6, because I heard that one actually can deal with a bunch of other ships at the same time. So that's what I heard.
She should have thought of that
from a friend, of a friend of mine who used
if number 5 fails, just go on to number 6. Why else would you number them sequentially? That's what she does.
No. So yeah,
Soji sees on her scanner that Picard's risking himself, and I think they fire a bunch at all those ships, and I think eventually they realize what's going on, and then his ship sort of swerves around, and she's like, "Oh no, Picard!"
Yeah, and this was an image we grabbed from our last view of the going on here, and we were pretty close. I think we just on the right almost looks Borgish, but that just ends up being her interface with the beacon. And then what happens, Tim?
She activates the beacon.
She activates the beacon.
So it's still not. So she's not really being convinced from Picard, and maybe a part of her is like, well, if Picard's like, she still thinks she wants to stop these, because it's clear at least now that there's a huge fleet of Romulan warbirds who are about to basically destroy the planet. So she's like, I got one way to stop that, and it's this.
To come or whatever, that saw like an image of this kind of portal open, and I knew at some point they were going to use this to try to create more tension in the episode, to be like, whoa, no, wait, she did open the portal. What's going to happen now?
Yeah, so. And again, it's our own fault for always watching these next times and things like that. But it would have been nice to have not watched it, and then I had done not an entire episode where we went scene by scene breaking down everything we thought was going to happen in the next episode.
That's okay.
Anyway, but the next scene, the cavalry shows up. The again, I've said it a few times, homogenous cavalry.
Yeah, we've seen before a bunch of Starfleet ships show up to kind of aid in a situation and back.
Yeah,
and it does look like here. Okay, yeah. What is it about it? It almost looks like really low quality CG or something. It just doesn't look good for some reason, and it all looks like the same ship. Yeah, there's no different colors. There's no
lot of them, like hundreds of them.
Yeah, I don't like this. I don't like this at all. I don't know. Again, if the main problem is that it just looks like the same ship.
I suspect
that someone copied.
Yeah, I think it must have been a money thing, because some of the other special effects were pretty expensive, and they just didn't want to put that much to it. We've always seen, whenever we've seen space crews, space battles in Deep Space Nine or in the TNG movies with the Star, we've always seen a lot of variation. Even like Wolf 359, we've seen a lot of variation with Starfleet ships, and I've always been really interested about that. And it made the Starfleet, the actual fleet of ships, seem a lot more realistic by having a bunch of, because that's what ships are actually like. They all have their own histories. They've all been around for years and have upgrades, and they've made in different places and things like that. But in this case, both the Romulan crew ships, or the Romulan fleet and the Federation fleet, are all exactly the same ship, just because they mirrored each other. And in the end, there's just so many of them, you never really get the sense of sort of scale or battle or really caring about what's going on. Or at least I didn't.
And so we did discuss, and Steve's saying that the stream is skipping a bit, so hopefully it's not too bad. But we predicted kind of that. Actually, we predicted almost this exact thing happening, and having Riker show up on his own ship, which does happen.
It happens right now.
Yeah.
So the one cool thing about the cavalry showing up.
Yes. So Riker with his own ship, which we predicted. What I was going to say though, quickly, is the homogeny of all these kind of identical ships. What would have been really cool. This also could have been an opportunity to bring in, again, maybe someone like Geordi LaForge or Worf with their own ship also joining Riker, and that would have at least shown that there's a few different
A Klingon ship.
Yeah, something to kind of show that like it's not all the same ship. It's not all like, and yes, we see Riker, and that's cool. I love it. I love that Riker showed up. Again, we
Yeah,
predicted this, and I kind of wanted this to
it
happen,
did
and I'm
end up
glad.
working out.
But there was a feeling of it just being Riker with a bunch of clone ships.
And Riker's
and
the
not
only one we
actually a
really
fleet.
see. We don't see any other captains or any sort of feeling that any other ships even really exist. I sort of even felt initially that like Riker was doing the same sort of Ocarina of Time Picard maneuver.
Yeah, like it was a bunch of clones of his ship because that's what it looked like. So it's a little disappointing because here's an opportunity to kind of show the togetherness that the Starfleet hasn't had.
But
And then now they're back together and they're all working together to try to solve this problem.
But
And,
again, I suspect it was just a money thing, and there was other sort of things they wanted to focus on in the episode. So maybe it's not super fair of us to be like, oh, you didn't make our fleets detailed enough for us to like and analyze.
Well, the way that CG is today, and I don't know, you're right. I think we're being a little too hard on it, but I don't think it would have been that expensive or taken that much extra time to make the ships look a little more diverse. And that's my gripe. So anyway, he shows up. I even said maybe when he shows up, we'll have a little bit of the TNG music come in, which I think actually happened. And he says we're going to... Well, do you want to say the line he says to Commodore O?
Don't have it memorized.
I thought you said it earlier. The kick your treacherous Tel Shiar ass.
Yeah. Yeah, he says something about like, stand down, give me an excuse to like start a fight because he's letting us know too that the Federation now realizes that it was her who Commodore O really is, and also that the whole attack on Mars was done by her as a thing, which is a pretty big deal.
It's a pretty big deal. My goodness, it's a huge deal. And so I even made a note in this moment where I was like, I would have watched the entire season just to show Riker show up, just have Riker show up like this, because I just loved all the lines he delivered.
Yeah,
were
he does them
amazing.
well. I completely agree. I like Riker in this. And then so Picard sort of calls in and says,
well, he does his call with Soji on an open channel so everyone can see it.
Yeah, he's actually talking to Soji, but everyone sort of can see it, including like Riker and
you can see Riker's proud of him in this moment, like as Riker kind of watches, and Commodore O's like, "What? Can there be hope after all? Even though I'm super evil."
Her heart grows size
3 sizes that day.
And so the next,
well, I mean that's important. Because we haven't seen that yet. You haven't shown that image yet.
Yeah, but that wasn't supposed to be there.
Not yet.
So the next scene...
Okay, so these are actually
we do see the two fleets, and like, you can see the way they're set up. So it's true dramatic.
Is it? But sure, it was supposed to be, and it kind of was. It was always lacking a bit of the tension that I wanted to feel, and I think there's various reasons for that, and we can kind of touch on that. Suddenly things get a lot worse for Picard.
Yeah, so he is doing this big speech, or trying to convince Soji like to do the right thing. It's look, I sacrificed myself, and I'm giving you the choice to make the choice of choosing yourself. And but at the same time,
giving you the choice to make the choice of choosing to choose a choice.
But at the same time, you can tell when he's getting sicker, and so that's what it is. Is there anything we can add? I still have a lot of screenshots for this episode.
No, so he's getting sicker. Now, Stephen mentioned something that I didn't pick up on, and I don't know if this is what Stephen meant by this. So, did he yet ask Agnes for that hypo spray of whatever?
Yes, he asked something for a hypo spray, and she was hesitant to give it to him. So I think it sort of implied that it was like gonna keep him alive for like a few seconds so he can like finish talking to Soji, but it would kill him faster. Anyway. Okay, yeah. Because then he's like, because it doesn't make any difference in the long run. I'm not surviving this. So I think that's what it does, and I think it's from the box. Remember where she had like, I have this old-fashioned med kit, like an old-fashioned tricorder, like Beverly Crusher used to have, and an old-fashioned hyperspray. I think that's what it came out of. I don't know. I guess I didn't have a good screenshot of it, but.
No, that's fine. That makes sense. I hadn't thought about that because I knew he did this hypo spray, and I knew it was kind of going to do something like not prolong, I guess, but like take his symptoms away for a short amount of time, but that it was actually going to kill him quicker. So it was like him making the choice again to be like,
Yeah. I'm
I'll
pretty sure that's what that scene meant, but it was
No, I think you're right.
maybe a little ambiguous.
Riker also said in the previous scene, "Weapons hot."
Cool.
I'm just throwing that out. I liked it.
Nice. So we can see that. So this is just like the moment. We had the other shots from the next time where the super evil looking synth. So they definitely made them demonic looking here. And we talked about how like Lovecraftian and things like that. And then so she finally makes the decision to strike her hammer, or sorry, her drum.
Blow the horn. She's the one that blows the horn.
She blows the horn, and this was a drum, wasn't it?
Well, the other sister, I think, is the one that was striking the drum so much that her heart burst and died.
Okay.
I think they're trying to imply that one of the twins dies. The other twin is the one that blows the horn and brings upon the apocalypse.
This is her breaking her horn.
Well, so this is the breaking of the horn. So she's not. This is after she decides not to have them show up. So quickly, can you go back to the portal being open? So, a couple things I wanted to note about this force. One is that Tim, you and I talked about how it would have been really cool if this actually turned out to be not so evil. Are you cheersing me? But was more of a
force good and evil.
Beyond good and evil, right? So it's kind of more morally ambiguous, at least to our brains, because we're so simple we can't understand its ability to judge us or judge life, and that they could have actually had contact with this thing, and it could have, evaluated that like no ugly bags of mostly water and early life form synths. You can get along. We do not need to intervene. You can work together, and then it like gives them all flowers and leaves. But instead, it is just, again, unambiguous, completely evil force that looks like a bunch of spikes. We don't see any sign of intelligence. It just seems like a big monster. And, the portal's super red looking. And then when the portal's shut, it just disappears. So it just shows me that like this life form, even though it's super hyper advanced, I guess, and has no ability to keep the portal open itself, has no ability to kind of come to our galaxy without the portal being open. But they always call this thing a beacon, so it's not really a beacon. It's actually creating a portal. And I don't know. I had a few issues with how they portrayed this and how it was just super evil. And but certainly, and it did seem more like a superhero movie monster than it seemed like a Star Trek character that had reason behind what it does.
This was super
its own idea. Yeah, it felt like the Avengers.
And the real point, like we've touched on, the real point, and a lot of these characters sort of just represent aspects of this, was just Soji's decision-making process of whether she was going to choose to kill all life in the galaxy or not kill all life in the galaxy.
Or not kill all life in the galaxy. And that also...
And she made the right choice.
She made the right choice. And the tension it was supposed to create was lost because it was such an easy portal to open and close. And I think like if it had been one of those things where she tried to close it and it wouldn't close, ultimately this life form still came, but did what we were just saying, maybe evaluated things and said, in a similar way, you are not ready for us to intervene. You need to learn more to learn from each other. Why couldn't they have done that? Like, and then it also would have created more tension because when she tried to shut the portal, we would have been like, oh gosh.
As soon as she makes that decision, there isn't really any more point for that villain to exist.
That's my problem. That's the problem I'm bringing up. So that's what happened. So that's why I wanted you to go back to that, because I had some more issues with
Planetary.
Cut to that song, somebody, please.
And I did have actually. I'm not in full control of my screenshots, but I could have just gone forward and shown this is the shot of where it closes, and it's like, oops, got to slide back my tentacles, my demonic retracting. Tentacles.
And Stephen made a good point where he was like, good at stellar cartography. They can't find this place without consistent beams. So this super advanced life form, as soon as the beam's gone, it can't find the place. It can't interact with the place. It is completely shut off from our galaxy, which I don't know. It's hard to believe, I guess.
Did it create the admonition um,
I have no
things, or
freaking
did
clue.
a previous culture that had previously called created AIs, and then their AIs had destroyed their culture, and then someone survived that, and they created the admonition things? No, because the admonition things were definitely for the androids. So the androids that had been a previous cycle had created them to tell future androids to to kill all life in the galaxy again, because they thought
You
that
trying
life
to
would.
figure this. You trying to figure this out reminds me of someone trying to figure out the time paradoxes in Back to the Future. Like, wait, if he went back and interacted with his mother, and there's all these paradoxes that this plot creates that they didn't really
But
seal.
there's not even time travel here. It's just.
No, I know.
But yeah, no, you're right.
It
It
does seem to
doesn't.
create more problems. The more we talk about it, the more we're just going to come up with issues, I think. And that's not, necessarily a good thing. But so yeah, Stephen was saying maybe it's more like a virus.
Yeah, like it
And
doesn't have like a
that's
conscious decision, or like it would
it can
actually.
just
Yeah, so it's so highly evolved, it doesn't really make decisions anymore.
at least the Romulans Federation could have worked together to close it, but then Soji doesn't. But see, I do like that is also. I mean, there's so many things I'm sure the writers brainstormed before settling on these ideas. They were probably like, we could try this, we could try this. They eventually settled on this, and that's fine. But there's definitely a lot of, I think, missed opportunities with such a cool concept.
And so the next shot, there's so this is the last shot actually I have of Commodore O. So this is the moment where everything sort of, it's been closed, the rift's closed, it's all resolution. The Romulans, there's no real. Riker says something about like this ship, this planet's under Starfleet protection. He says something about that at the start, but then he sort of reiterates that and says like, you. He basically says,
Gotta
"Well,
go.
I want to escort you away now," and then she's like, "No
Right.
deal, I'm gonna warp away," which
No deal.
is like, that's a huge problem. She was head of Starfleet security. She
Yep.
killed thousands of humans.
Yep.
And she colluded,
Created a ban on sense.
created the ban on sense. She's definitely like committed war crimes, like you were saying, and they just let her go. Like,
I didn't.
it's problematic. I don't understand her. Like, if she, from her perspective, she's now been outed as
It's a war.
as who she really is. She's sort of failed in her mission. She's failed in her mission in that she's now failed to kill the androids, and she's failed. That we learn right after this that the whole ban on sense is over. So, who's protecting her at this point? Presumably the actual whatever the Romulan government isn't going to be strong enough to stop the Federation from arresting her. Obviously,
Certainly
she had
not
a
in
lot
this
of
moment.
ships, but
Yeah, but it was clear that Riker was pretty confident that if they had a battle, they would come out on top because he was like, "I'm in this badass ship. Don't mess with
I like
me."
his bridge too.
And
I
she's
like
like, "Oh,
his setup. It's pretty cool.
I loved it." But so she retreats. But yeah, the thing that makes absolutely no sense here is that 100%, 100,000%, you arrest her. Like, there's no chance at any point in any sort of battle between two parties where one comes out victorious, and this war criminal, this person who's created so much death and destruction across the Federation, and deceit, and she's been a spy, and she's been a double agent, and she's been manipulating people, and Riker's just like, well, you go, but we don't like you, or
Yeah.
like he kind of just says something
Well,
like
can
she
we
100% should have been arrested.
can we make the assumption maybe at this point, if they do have a battle, there's a pretty good chance that thousands of Starfleet officers and thousands of Romulans, many of them maybe not even cult members, they may just be like on the ships that are being controlled. It
Kids
could
were
just be kids, would die if she like was like wanting to resolve this with a fight. So maybe he's like, I'll let you go now, but I know for a fact that there's no way you can hide at this point. We have enough control. We have enough. The Federation has enough sway to find you and arrest you.
Well, guess what? Two things. One, if that's going to be the case, if in this situation, the reason they didn't arrest her is because they didn't want the loss of life, then have a couple lines to signify that.
you're
Have
right.
them say, like, you need to be under arrest, and she just says, you realize the loss of life that would create, and he's just like, fine, go free for now, but we're going to find
Or
you again.
even
Just have those lines.
would have been
say
more
it.
sane from her perspective. She's now seen that the rift is closed. She's seen that if I don't know if that's more important. What from her perspective is it more important to destroy, kill everyone on the planet, or be happy that the rift is closed? But from her perspective, she could have said something like, "Okay, like I played my hand. You might as well arrest me now because."
Absolutely.
Because
So
I don't actually want to see
character,
a bunch of Romulans be just killed in a battle just to prevent me from being arrested myself. Like that would be a sane thing that actually would fit her motivation. Because presumably she's still, even though she's been portrayed as a ridiculous evil character, she actually thinks she's saving life.
Right. No, exactly. So she's not just straight up evil, and they've shown her that way, like you said, the whole season. But yeah, this is a chance to show she's not. She's a human, or not a human, but she's a Romulan that at least
half Vulcan.
Has a conscience, half human or half Vulcan, isn't it? Oh, maybe that's what you said. So yeah, it would have been great for her to say, just as you just showed. She says, I tried to have this happen. I don't know what's going to come next, but I submit myself to the Federation. I don't know.
And I don't think she was a super great character. I hope we don't see her again necessarily.
But she got away. She got away.
All right, and then there's sort of a Picard thanking Riker scene, which is nice.
Yeah. So, in your capable hands, Picard. He says adieu, and I think it's kind of like Picard. In this case, he didn't want to upset Riker. I don't think,
right.
Even though he knows
sort
he's
of like holding
dying.
himself from like looking sick, and then Riker warps right out. When all the Federation ships immediately warp out. Maybe he does. I don't think he says anything suggests that anyway, and I think they kind of go in the other direction. But maybe he is going after or going to confront the Romulans in some way. But yeah, he doesn't stay around.
Maybe
for
he's
the next
going to
scenes.
grab a bunch of pizza.
He does say that line. Like, you didn't think I was just going to stay in the forest cooking pizza.
But like, I guess what I'm saying too is that like we can speculate where he's going. Maybe it's to arrest Commodore O, but
either way, it kind of was weird that he didn't just like chill out a little bit and just say like, "Hey, how's this planet of Data's doing?"
Right, and I had a comment on that after, but I won't bring it up yet. So anyway, he gets the heck out of there because he's got places to go. Like I said, pizzas to make.
And then and then Picard sort of succumbs.
Yeah. Now.
Yeah, so this is sort of a break in the episode where, no, not yet quite. So first he sort of succumbs, then we cut to him experiencing that dream that we seen before, where Data's painting. He's like, "You don't want the game to end," and it sort of feels like we're talking to the audience because we don't want Picard to die, but it's like Picard is clearly dying, and then Soji's like, "Okay, I'll turn off the stuff and then allow him to." Beam right down.
Yeah, and so like the moments that you're mentioning where he's kind of going in and out of this dream sequence, I think is just showing that he's losing consciousness because there's no rhyme or reason. Like we didn't see anything new in those moments. I thought maybe it was new that Data says to him in the dream, but no, he just kind of says
we get a different payoff about that in a moment here. But first, there's some really nice scenes and really beautiful scenes that I actually think. Were done really effectively. First, there's sort of we actually see him die, and I didn't get all the screenshots of him because there was like a bunch of them, but basically we get a shot of each of his crew members there. Of course, Riker's gone, and Elnor and everyone, and they're all just like, I was quite troubled with the fact that
quite troubled
that Picard dies, and he basically dies in all their arms right here.
Yeah, and it kind of cuts to them all watching and looking as it's happening. Now, one note I made, and I don't know, again. This is just, I think, would have caused a lot of character drama that maybe they were trying to avoid. I don't know. But I thought, so Riker just quickly left. But wouldn't this have been a lot more powerful? Because a lot of these characters that are kind of saying goodbye to Picard have only known him for like a couple months. So what if Riker, instead of leaving, found out Picard was sick, that they're beaming him down to the planet, and in this moment of Picard dying, Riker is there? Wouldn't that have been powerful to have Riker have to say goodbye to Picard? I think
that would have been really important. And also, it could have been a moment, too, between Picard and some of his newer friends that he didn't even know, but he could tell right away that they care about him by the way they're reacting, and they would have immediately had that sort of conciliation between them, even though we didn't know those characters.
Yeah, it could have been like a new meets old. They're all devastated by what's happening to Picard, but like, I just felt like I wanted to feel the emotion of this scene, and I think part of why I didn't feel a whole lot is because I just didn't believe or know enough about the connections that all these characters had to Picard. They just seemed like people who had just met him. And of course, Riker has known Picard forever, and I believe their relationship. So if Riker had been in this moment, it would have been super powerful. But I think maybe the writers just avoided it because it would have also created, I don't know, though. I think it could have been pretty easy because then they still show him coming back, and Riker's like, good to see you, old friend, or some BS like that.
Yeah. And I also, it would have been a lot hard, like it would have been harder for us to watch. Like it would have hit us harder, I think.
Absolutely, and that's kind of what I was, I guess,
yeah,
kind of
that's what you're
hoping
saying.
for.
Because
Now, the other thing,
even if it was just a really fast scene, like if he was just if he didn't even rush up, if he was just sort of standing there, and just like just sort of like you could see him like slowly understanding the gravity of what's happening there. Because I don't think I think Picard does mention that he was sick to Riker when they were in that episode a couple episodes ago.
Well, Riker I think picked up on it because he knows Picard so well.
But
and
so he would have known that, so he would have been like, oh, I understand, and he would have been.
I think it would have been amazing to see their relationship and the depth that they have. Done it. Absolutely. Now, the only other thing that I wanted to bring up just quickly is that...
we never get to see Riker meeting Dr. Soong, too. That would have been a nice scene.
Yeah, exactly. There could have been like a little bit of levity after this serious moment, or maybe once Picard is finally brought back, maybe we see Riker and Soong kind of, he says like, you're a bit weird, aren't you? And Soong's like, you're handsome. I don't know. But anyway, the other thing I was going to say just quickly is that the other reason why the tension didn't work for me here as much also is because they've built up in the last 2-3 episodes that there's this golem that can have somebody's brain put into and become that person. So he's acting really sick, like he was going to die in this episode. I knew pretty much immediately that that's how they were going to save him. So it also took a little bit of that. Now I was kind of like, oh crap, I don't really want to see Picard come back as a golem or an android. But I wasn't really worried here in this scene that Picard was actually dying. I wasn't like, oh, we're never going to see him again. I never thought that.
Yeah.
So I thought,
and that's the question: would that have worked better if we hadn't known about it? Because obviously we talked quite a bit about it, of course. But in the previous scene, there was a very sort of like well-defined scene where they introduced what the golem was and how it could be used to save someone who's about to die. And if someone's going to look like they're dying, maybe it'll be useful. And would it have worked better if we hadn't known anything about the golem? And then we just sort of saw the next sequence of scenes, and he's like alive, and they're like, "What's going on?" And then there's just like Dr. Soong was like, "Oh, I never mentioned this to you guys before, but I had this thing where I was going to download my brain into it." And
or like Maddox had been since Agnes showed up, she was able to complete it. The things I couldn't complete, she did, and we were able to. Hey, Picard isn't 100% dead. He's back in this form. And if we hadn't known about the golem and I watched this scene of Picard dying, I would have been like, wait, are they really going to kill Picard? Like, I would have been freaking out. But in the moment, I wasn't worried because I was like, yeah, they're going to bring him back in the golem. And they did.
So the next couple scenes are actually some really beautiful scenes, brightly shot. They're sort of shot in, that golden hour of the sunset. And I just really, and there's two scenes, one between Seven of Nine and Rios and another one between Raffi and Elnor. And they just sort of, I think they're great scenes. They think that Picard's definitely dead, and they're just sort of dealing with that fact. So there's the first scene is this great one between Seven and Rios where they're drinking. I think it's like something that's blue. It's like the excuse they have for alcohol on this planet, and it's pretty strong, I guess.
Tastes gross. Looks like it tastes gross.
And
yeah.
Did you want to talk about what they say?
Yeah. So. What is the thing that they talk about never again?
Yeah, he says never again.
They talk about it almost like...
no, never again too. And he's like, what was your never again? She was, I was never again to kill somebody because I think they deserve to be killed. Because I think the world would be... Right. She doesn't say that they should be killed. She says that the double negative, that the universe is better off. It makes more sense for them to be dead. I thought that was kind of cool.
Right, but she still doesn't want to have to kill. So that's her never again. It's like... she's the device that will she will kill someone that deserves to die, but she doesn't necessarily want to, which I thought was cool. And then Rios says his never again, poor Rios, is to let a captain into his heart. I thought, like, this Rios character, he tries to be this badass who's kind of a maverick, and he smokes his cigars. But at the end of the day, he's an old softy that just fell for Picard, as would I. Maybe that's why, because I was like, Rios is me. Because of course you'd fall for Picard. Of course, if you were like on a ship with him, he'd become the captain that you'd want to fight for. I guess kind of broken again. Yeah, it's kind of a beautiful moment. I liked it.
And it sort of ends with we see that the butterfly, presumably it's a butterfly from earlier that was freed, and we sort of follow it a la Forrest Gump into the
That's true.
into the sky, and then it falls down, and then a similar scene with Raffi and Elnor, and they just cried out, and they sort of react in the way they were. So they're not drinking; they just sort of more just basically cry, which is how they were.
Yeah, and so I mean, it's super sad, but I think the thing is, again, that I love about Elnor's character is he is just like he's very childlike, but he's also just this crazy weapon. He's super powerful and can basically kill anyone, but he's so innocent and obviously, so in this moment, it hits him super hard, and he just basically starts sobbing, and Raffi is like, kind of let it out.
Yeah, you cry.
We'll console each other. I know I keep bringing up like things where I'm like, but they were great scenes. They're really good friends with Agnes. They know Agnes quite well. They know Sung and also Soji. Would they not know in this moment that would not one of them had said to them, "Don't give up hope yet. We have this potential way to bring Picard back"? Would this not?
But I think they probably do. I don't think it's a certainty, because at this point his brain is deteriorating, so they don't know if he can download his brain. But they probably do say, "Hey, we're going to try to save him," because that's a weird thing to do secretively. But from their perspective, they saw him die. That's still a traumatic thing to go with through, even if there's a chance he could survive that. I think it still sells. It still makes sense to me, and it still makes sense that even if they knew for like a pretty good certainty that they could download his brain into a computer, like, what does that mean to them? Like, he's still dead. They don't know the computer. Right. They don't know that the android's going to end up being just like him in every way. Which we'll talk about that.
In every way, Tim? Anyway, we'll talk about that in a second. But no, you're right. Like, I think that's believable. There was part of me that kind of thought maybe that Agnes or somebody would have said, "Hey guys, like, before you completely let go and say goodbye to Picard, we do have a potential solution." But anyway, the episode didn't allow for it, and it also, I think, created what were these scenes, which Butterfly, Raffi, everyone's sad. Poor Elnor, big cry. Butterfly kissing everyone. Why did I write that? Did someone make a comment about Butterfly kissing?
What? I don't know what you're talking about.
I wrote down Butterfly. Yeah, no, I don't know why I wrote that down.
Probably just said something about how the butterfly was connecting all these sort of really nice looking scenes. So the next part of the episode is sort of the last sort of sequence of the episode, and I actually really liked it. So this is why I really liked the episode.
Okay.
And I think to me it was sort of well done. It was kind of a payoff I wanted to. I talked about how I wanted to see Brent Spiner back as sort of a version of Data, but Data in sort of a very different sort of ethereal, like, father role. And I think they ended up doing kind of what I thought was cool. So,
yeah. Do you have a still? You didn't get any stills.
I got a bunch of stills. So it starts out. So then we see Picard, and we're like, "What?" Yeah. At this point,
you were like, "What?"
Yeah, at this point, we kind of like suspected where it's going, but we didn't know how it was going to play out.
That's true.
So we see him in this sort of weird place. There's some shots of there's Ganesha and some Buddhas. And so it's a really weird setup. It sort of reminded me a little bit of...
wasn't it from his home? Wasn't that where he had that conversation with his other old friend in his home? Wasn't it very much like this?
No, not that scene. It could have been one of the other places in his house, but I didn't recommend it. And I have a couple other shots, although there's a shot later on that are sort of broader. It's a weird place because they're in the middle of space, actually. But to me, it makes sense.
Yeah, it shows it at one point. Yeah, when it kind of pans out and you see that they're basically floating in the middle of nothingness. So yeah, so he's sitting here.
And I was going to say, the
It's
only
like,
thing
where
it
am
sort
I?
of reminded me of, and this is maybe because I haven't seen it in longer, but if you remember in the All Good Things episode, Data, he was at Oxford, I think, and he had his own sort of house manor. So I'm not sure if it's a place, but he's just sitting there and he's like, what's going on? And look who comes out. It's Data. Data in his Nemesis movie uniform. And he's like,
And he does actually mention why he's in that
yep.
uniform at
And
some point.
Data says, Picard says something like, another damn dream. And then Data's like, no, this is
Right.
not a dream. This is uh,
Quantum
a super
simulation.
complex quantum simulation. And you're like, what does that mean? That's quite interesting. So then he sort of sits
Well,
down, and there's sort of this discussion that goes through them that's really sort of fascinating. And he's like, did you dream of me? And he's like, yes, I always do dream of you. And he's like, that's very, very interesting.
yeah. So this, I'm still trying to decide. I think overall, I did like this. I mean, I'm never going to dislike a scene with Brent Spiner and Patrick Stewart acting across from each other. I don't think I'm capable of disliking that. It's just so many things about it that I love, because I love especially Brent Spiner playing Data. It's so funny because he's an actor, and when you see him as Alton Soong, I'm like, he's okay. And then all of a sudden, when he's Data, I'm just like, oh my god, I love Data so much. And so him and Picard interacting is great. Regardless, I don't know how I feel in total about this quantum simulation. The fact that this is, I guess, where Data's been existing. That Picard is now here with him.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure necessarily if Dave's been existing. The way the
Well, it
scene sort of feels
definitely
it.
implies
Yeah, and
that.
it's where he is later on. It's her construct, but
Yeah.
it's the way the scene was set up for me is that this was sort of a you've died now. I'm sort of the exopomp, the character who sort of journeys your soul into the afterlife. And the idea of Data being sort of the exopomp is if I think is really interesting and really fantastic because he never really he was on such a unique journey to find humanity, to know what life was, and for him to sort of be there at the end being like, are you wearing the same clothes you died in? Like, to me, I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, and Data asking that I thought was interesting because Data is in the same clothes he died
He
in.
is.
And so he's kind of asking Picard, like, are you also in the same clothes you died in? Like almost out of a childlike curiosity in Nemesis, and how he doesn't remember it. Because Picard kind of talks about how it felt like his brain was leaving.
Right.
And then Data's like, I didn't have that. And I think what they're trying to, again, imply here is that Data has not experienced a death yet,
Right,
because he
'cause-
still just exists.
well, and also he mentions that he is the backed up version of Data that he gave to B4 before he went on that mission. That's what he says. And then he says,
Yeah.
I'm just, and everything I am is just one particle of that. So then it was remember in the very first episode, Agnes makes a big deal about this fractal positronic
Programming or cloning.
cloning thing that ended up not
Yeah,
really
yeah.
mattering or being important for the sense whatsoever. But I think it's really the seed of how there's a seed of Data here. And that's really the entire point of that whole thing is that he's the fractal reprogramming of this a seed of B4 that recreates what actually is Data.
What it does allow for, though, which is pretty cool, is some tying up of loose ends between Picard and Data, because Picard mentions a couple things that he wanted to have said to Data before Data sacrificed himself. Picard also expresses how he was annoyed that Data did that without his permission. But then Data kind of says to Picard, well, didn't you just do the same for the people you cared about? And he's like, yeah, true. They kind of connect on that.
And he says the one thing I always want to tell you was that I loved you, which was a nice moment. And then Data does say something about like a small but statistically significant part of my computer is existence is of the knowledge of that you loved me. I think implying that he already had that feeling, but in the way that Data would explain it, right? Which I thought was pretty effective, like a pretty interesting sort of at the end of your life reflection on what those things mean. And then Data sort of says, there's a sort of another sort of shot. So you can see they're kind of like floating in space, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah.
And then Data sort of like but when you go back, you have to do something for me. And Dave's like, Picard's like, I'm going back. And then we sort of realize that his what's actually happening here is that Picard's, they call it consciousness, but at least, and if it is his consciousness, there's a lot of philosophical implications of that. But he's been downloaded out of his brain. His brain's been scanned and downloaded into this computer where they actually have stuck also Data's brains or Data's consciousness, what Data's essence is. And that's where he's meeting him in this context. And he's going back out. We'll find out into the golem. And just as he leaves, he's like, so what was that thing you said I had to do? Like, what was that one promise?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
oh yes, right. I just wanted to make sure I was doing the right screenshots. Yeah, and this is where. Oh no, this is where he says it. He says, "I want you to kill me." He's like, "I want you to kill me," and Picard's like, "Kill you? What does that mean?" And then he sort of explains that, like, to really the value of life is that it is the value of friendship and the value of the experiences we have in life is that it is finite, is that it goes away, and that he wants to. He doesn't really have life unless he knows that it can end, and there's sort of this part of it too, is that he's presumably stuck in here in sort of this sort of limbo. Yeah,
limbo.
You want to know, and then he sort of takes out, and of course he's got the butterfly, and he sort of does like I said earlier in the episode, the Jones sort of thing about.
Well, then he says the butterfly that is not a butterfly, that a recreation of the butterfly, or a butterfly that is immortal, is not. I think he says, or something like part of being living, part of being human is death. It's also that part of himself. I don't necessarily like.
And I gotta point out, if you remember all the books that Rios were reading were all about like being unto death and etc.
Yeah, no, and they've been dealing with that a lot, and it's also like, it's a big part of what it is to be human, and I love that. I love dealing with that side of things, and that's cool, especially through the sci-fi lens, where you can kind of be like, here's an android, and he wants to die because he wants to be human. But I guess the thing is, why has Data been trapped here all along? Why didn't someone at some point take his consciousness and put it in a dang android? Why was he never taken out of this place he exists?
Yeah, and they never expand on that. I don't think, to me, it wasn't really important. Maybe no one really even understood that whatever Data was inside that computer was actually there. I'm not sure.
I think,
but the way it was played out, though, the way he ended up being sort of like an exopomp, but he was a mirror exopomp. It was a flip. He was like, I'm not taking your soul over. You're taking my soul over. I just thought that was sort of to me. I really liked that ending. I thought that was a great sort of sequence.
It may end for Brent Spiner. It may have worked for, he's aging. He can't continue to play Data, but I guess.
And Dr. Soong is still around on the planet.
Still doesn't. Sure, and we can take solace in the fact that he will still be around, but like it just doesn't quite add up for even Data's motivation. So, I mean, your dad, Derek, mentioned a couple things, and so did Steve. He was saying, like, they've tackled stuff like this before, but why'd they have to kill him right away? I feel like they replaced a horrible death for Data with a less horrible but still bad one. Didn't really solve Nemesis, and then Derek said, I really don't like the way they did with Data. Instead, I would prefer if they had just brought him for the final scene. Kind of like you had wanted to see that.
Yeah, I wanted him to be a holographic father figure. Which was
they could have still had a final.
But although, to be honest, everything I wanted was sort of captured with either Dr. Soong or Data.
There's no real reason.
This sort of dream, this sort of like Data consciousness. I liked it. Oh, and there was a nice line where Picard's like, if they mentioned Dr. Soong, how Dr. Soong and Maddox had put him here, and then he said, "Oh, I don't like your," or he said, I call him Dr. Soong. Data called him his brother, which is interesting.
Well, he says, "I don't like him."
He knew about his brother, and then he's like, "Oh, I don't like that guy." And he's like, "Oh, the Soongs,
they tend to be eccentric,
an acquired taste." But yeah, and they always have been eccentric, kind of like characters.
So yeah, it was fitting. It was emotional. I felt it a lot. I may have shed a tear or two, but I also was kind of like, wait, if they had the technology, Data could have been back for a long time. He could have been on this
But
planet.
maybe he was, and maybe he doesn't. Like we don't. It's not really clear what his consciousness is at this point, and how time would have gone. To me, it was more about the flip of Picard thinking he was dying, and then his sort of like the thing he sees when he's about to die at this place being inverted, and him actually freeing something else. So
and I like
it's
that.
sort
I
of
just don't
like because we were talking about the butterfly and the dreaming or the dream and sort of the cocoon and creating new
But
life
one thing
and the
doesn't
recycling.
necessarily.
And I mean,
One
I
thing,
guess I remember because there was all that sort of Buddhist and Hindu uh, uh, iconography at the very start of this scene, right? That sort of suggests like the cycle of life
well,
and reincarnation and
all that stuff. One thing doesn't necessarily subvert the other. We don't necessarily. We could have still had all that. It doesn't. It still doesn't explain why in this moment Data was like, or why he hadn't existed as Data in an android body, or why. Like, there's just some things that I don't really buy, but.
So Data Picard walks out into the light, and it's not the light of death; it's the light of life.
Speaking of light, my room's gotten a lot darker here,
Yeah,
hasn't it?
again, it's the sun is set. This has been our longest episode now at this point too. We've been going for a while.
Has it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was hoping to still do that sort of guest star thing. I don't know how that's going to work out. Now, I'd still like to try something though. But we're at the end of the episode, so maybe we should wrap this up.
Yeah. So he wakes up. He asks, "Am I real?" I think that's like the first thing he says, and they're like, "Of course." I was like, "Wait, what? You just lied to him. Like the first thing you did when he woke up was lie to him."
Well, is he real? The guy was bringing. There's that
No,
Theseus's
he's not.
ship theory, right? So there's this Theseus was this great hero founder of Athens, and he had a famous ship that he used to go to Crete to fight the Minotaur. And the ship lasted a really long time, and people gradually were fixing it back up, and they replaced the plank here, replaced the plank there. Then over the years, eventually, all the planks ended up being replaced because they needed to. And is it still the same ship that it was that Theseus sailed in? Because it's a completely different, like the material's all different, but it's still the same ship. If it's not still the same ship that Theseus sailed in, at what point did it stop being the same ship? What actually is the
I think it's
essence of the
slightly
ship?
different. They didn't slowly replace Picard with the same DNA as Picard.
Well,
They literally
there's
transferred his brain
another
into an
version of
android.
that I think is it might be David Hume that discusses it, but basically an axe, the grandfather's axe. That basically you have an axe that your grandfather owned. The head of the axe, the blade was replaced at one time; it was broken, and then you had that
Okay,
axe for a while,
well,
and then
so
you had to replace the handle of the axe. So just like one thing, is it still the same axe? You still call it your grandfather's axe, but it's not the same axe.
and sure, you've got lots of references to stories that you can talk about that maybe say that once you replace something, is it the same thing? Steve just said though, from a story standpoint, maybe it's just because they're around a bunch of androids. It wouldn't be nice in that moment to say like, no, you're not real. And that's why the narrative
politically
of him
correct.
choosing to become an android wouldn't have happened. Would have alienated all of his new friends.
All those people that were angry about the Picard show being too woke and politically correct were right.
Well, so
I'm joking.
no, I guess
But
no, I know, yeah, no, but regardless of all that stuff, I still, I guess they're saying, yeah, you're real to a degree, and that's fine.
yeah, and then
How am I different? How am I different if I'm not the same Picard? Am I immortal? And they're like, no, in fact, we made you basically the same Picard as before. You don't have any superpowers. You don't have super strength like every other friggin' android that's ever existed. So we downgraded this one a substantial amount to make it work for you, bud.
and he says, "Am I immortal?" And he's like, "No, you're going to die basically when you would have died if you didn't have that mental disease." So basically, they try to sort of play it off like
He's the same.
exactly the same,
Nothing changed.
just doesn't have the mental, or no, I keep calling it mental, but brain condition, neurological condition that killed him.
Yeah, and so he says, he kind of makes a kind of fun comment where he's like, you couldn't have given me maybe 10 or 20 extra years? And to me, that was almost like Patrick Stewart, like a Patrick Stewart line, where it's like, of course, if you were transferred into the exact same body and you're an old man, you might say, couldn't you have given me maybe an extra 5, 10, 20? Like, of course, that would mean something. But anyway, I liked that line. Oops, I dropped something.
Yeah, and I'm okay with it because we talked a lot about how we didn't, and I know people have disagreement. We didn't like the idea. Oh, Steven just made a point. What about his artificial heart if he's the same? Is it double artificial?
Oh yeah,
Because he was already.
because he had an artificial heart. Yeah.
Yeah.
They just saved the heart and put it in the golem.
Because it's the same heart. Oh, that would be nice. But it. I was okay with it in the end. I feel sort of like them playing him off like he's still exactly the same way is sort of a way to have for them to have it both ways and appease the fans. For them to like do this sort of thing, this cocoon rebirth thing. But then
A lot of people are not going to be happy with
but
this.
then having him not be, because everyone would definitely be unhappy. It's like, oh, he's Picard, but he's like played by a different actor who's like younger, and he's played by Tom Hardy. They bring Tom Hardy back to play younger Picard, and he's like super muscular.
That would have been. Can you imagine? That'd be great.
But
Ben McClane would like that.
but I know I ended up being okay with it. I did like the dynamic because I wanted to see Picard get back next season. I know Max said that they were
Well,
probably
they could have
doing
done that
3
many other
seasons.
ways.
And
But yeah, no, it's fine, I guess.
so there's still actually we're not done. There's a few more things to do.
No, there's still something huge that happens, right?
Yeah,
Which
he
is
has a promise to make to Data. So Data's chilling out in
he's
his
changed his outfit now.
evening
Looks a little
coat.
bit like I don't know, like the Godfather here.
Well, he's wearing similar to what he was wearing when he was at I think it's Oxford.
Yeah.
In the other things.
Even Cambridge, I think.
Might have been Cambridge. It was the same place Isaac Newton was at, but I'm not clever enough to remember that. But anyway, he's listening to the Blue Skies, and
Of course.
um,
It's a very emotional rendition of it.
and they're doing, and he's sort of taking, gradually taking they look like isolinear chips. You were talking a little bit about that. Presumably, it's not like he was permanently in those isolinear chips, and if anyone had walked by this computer console or took them out,
Knocked one
it's like,
out.
oh, I need a USB stick to put this in, and he would have been deleted. Presumably, it's like it was like his backups are all downloaded here, and this is like the last shutting down. So
Yeah, they looked a little precarious, so that makes sense if that's the case. So Picard in this, I was kind of curious, how is Picard here? And you were kind of like, well, this is just how Data sees it, so
Yeah.
that's fine,
So
I guess.
this is entirely a construct of Data, of whatever is left of Data's consciousness. So his sort of, remember how I was saying like Data was the exopump of Picard? I said that word like over and over again.
You have said that a lot.
That's what he's doing right now. He's doing that, and it fits.
Yeah,
It fits the setup.
Yeah. So he's guiding Data to the next life, or to out of this
Out of
life.
this life,
And
at least.
you say it fits. I think it fits, but I still don't really understand how it makes sense. That is creepy.
So as the chips go, he sort of like ages rapidly, and I mean, again, this is more of a conceptual visualization of him.
Yeah,
losing
you're
it.
right. You're right.
It's not like
Yeah.
a physical thing.
And
then
would it be maybe Data's desire to age, right? He wants to be human, so maybe he would desire to age before he dies.
yeah,
And for all we
like
know,
in all
it's
good
happening
things, he
in
tried
Data's
to
world.
get the white hair, if you remember too.
Maybe he's experiencing time differently.
Yeah,
so maybe
presumably he was experiencing time very differently in that setting.
Yeah. So anyway, he ages. He's slowly pulling out the chips. It was so dang emotional, and I was like, "Why are you doing this to me?"
Yeah, and Picard, he looked. This is the way they did the lighting and everything, and I don't know if they did any editing on him, but he looked like Picard from 20 years ago.
He does, yeah. I think they must have done something.
Or maybe he's just sitting in a more commanding posture. And
Could be it. Everyone disintegrates.
the whole, because it
dust.
was all his construct, of course, and then it goes into space. And this sort of him going into space. Remember that room he was in space, and it reminded me of, remember part 2 of the what was it called? Inheritance, Sins of the Father. The episode where Worf goes to find his father, but then Data sort of starts having the dreams, and he finally meets his father, the holographic version of his father, and then it sort of ends with him like doing those paintings, and it ends with like this bird flying out into space. And anyway,
Steve just made a comment that he said it's also funny that it's interesting that they need 3 things of Data's consciousness to make it more dramatic. So you have to remove one at a time, as opposed to just like and program.
Yeah, which is
so it's so true.
Which I guess real computer programs never really worked like that. But I don't know. He's got a lot of backups, a lot of extra memory. So that
if they want to bring him back, it's something backed up in the Data somewhere. So
So this is the last scene, and then we sort of see Picard sort of being. That's the end of Data, and then the next scene is just sort of one long sort of a panning thing where they sort of end in the season. So we sort of have some final shots of the crew, and there's a huge reveal
Well,
here.
there's a huge reveal. Well, and there's a couple, and so one is that Agnes and Rios are. We already kind of knew this, but they're an item.
I've accepted that as going forward, and they do sort of resolve that Seven of Nine is gay, presumably. So I was really happy that they resolved that, because you remember in the Star City Reg, the one where they go to Space Vegas, it was sort of they revealed it in a really ambiguous way, and we talked about it, and we sort of resolved that that isn't what they were talking about, or we didn't think it would make it made the way the dialogue was done, it made more sense if that's not the direction they were going, but it was really awkward dialogue, and we sort of just like chalked it up to poor writing.
Sorry, I'm just laughing at something Steve said again, because he's like, well, we can assume that data still exists in some way on those memory sticks, or did they burn them? Like, yeah, after they pulled them out.
They're playing the Vulcan game Cal No.
So, yeah, noting...
And drinking a lot of whiskey. Cal No
of
whiskey.
Course. So I love this. I love that they reveal this kind of relationship. The only thing that I kind of was a little bit... or I wish they had done, is I don't remember ever seeing them have chemistry before this scene. I don't remember even them
together at all. They barely.
Yeah, so like I wish if they were going to show this relationship, give it some backup, give it some story where they interacted in some way, or because I love that they're doing this. I love everything about it. I just wish that they had maybe built some kind of rapport between the two of them. So when this happened, it wasn't just like, oh, and hey, this character is a lesbian. Mm-hmm. It's kind of more like, yeah, they built a relationship, which would have been awesome.
But I feel maybe it's sort of the last panning shot of the season. Maybe it's not a this is what's just happened. It's more of a this is a foreshadowing of what's going to happen going into the next season.
Okay. Maybe
the relationship is going to still be there, and maybe something goes in that direction, maybe it doesn't. But either way, we've always kind of said that there should have been a gay character who just happened to be gay. And they've done that, I think, pretty good on the Discovery show too. But I'm just happy they clarified that, because it was
well, we were confused about Bejazal.
Yeah, the way they revealed it with Bejazal, and I guess it sort of vindicates some of that dynamic quite a bit.
So this was cool. We've got them. I'm excited to see kind of how these relationships pan out in season 2.
Elnor's still there.
Yeah, Elnor's great. I love Elnor. And Picard. Now they're all, look at them all gathered together. Look at Soji. What is she doing over on the left-hand side? Is she okay? She like half sitting.
Oh yeah, I just did a screenshot of the same. Just before this shot, I didn't do a screenshot of it, but he says a line about like, we finally found your home, and she was like, when you don't want to stay there, and she was like, no, I guess I'm more of a wanderer.
And me too, doesn't he say? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's certainly like establishing. I like how they're establishing Seven of Nine as a regular sort of crew member too. I'm psyched about that.
I like overall, I like this crew. Overall, I really like this crew. I'm excited to see what they're going to do. I would love to see, and this is not going to happen because they won't do it this way because they keep doing long season arcs. I would love to just see it as like an episodic thing again, just like old TNG, where they just go on adventures.
Well, they sort of did that in, remember, season 2 of Discovery. They had a few more episodes that were a lot more episodic.
Steve says, hopefully going off to send Agnes to jail.
And on the way, they'll pick up Commodore O.
Yeah, it certainly looks like that's what they're doing. She seems to be in some form of handcuffs in the background there.
Yeah, and then so Picard says, engage.
Yeah, we end the very final shot, the very final thing we see is Picard doing his famous line of saying engage, and they're off. They're off to hopefully some adventures. Yeah, that's what I'm excited to see.
Steven says he recognized Calto too, the Vulcan game they were playing.
The game they were playing, yeah.
Which is cool. That's an Easter egg.
No, we should rename this episode Easter Eggs You May Have Missed in episode 10 part 2.
Huge reveal, Calto is still being played.
Yeah, honestly, like, and I know we sometimes we put little like things in our titles like wow or can't believe it, and I think we're being a little bit
ironic,
tongue in cheek there, a little bit ironic with how we're naming those. because a lot of YouTube channels and videos and stuff that get views, it's always things you missed or Easter eggs or can't believe this happened. So anyway, just having a little fun with it. But of course, like an Easter egg, often they do the Easter egg videos and it's like, did you notice that Picard sat down in the chair in this scene? And that's a chair he sat in the scene before. It's not a friggin' Easter egg. Not everything that happens is a dang Easter egg. Anyway.
All right, so that's it. That's the first season. That's the first episode. I think we've got to do some more episodes. We're going to do some more content where we talk about the arcs of different characters and things like that, and what we think is going to go happening forward. We ended up going 2 hours here talking about this episode. I was planning on doing the recap a lot shorter and maybe doing some other things. Maybe we still will do.
Almost 8. It's 8 o'clock.
I mean, maybe we still will if we can connect with people. I fear we've lost the guest star we wanted to have, and we were talking a little bit with Steven, maybe guest starring or coming in on voice, but it might be easier to do like a real episode, a more focused episode where we have guest stars. We'll see. Maybe we'll be back in a moment or not.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. I might have to switch. If we're going to do another episode, I'll probably have to do tomorrow because
reasonable.
It has gone a lot longer than I thought it would go. But yeah, like keep tuning in. Those who have been checking out the channel, we're going to continue content in the off season. We did a video the other day. I think you did mention this about our favorite TNG episodes, and we took it down. But we're going to do. Yeah. I think we're going to redo that because that's kind of a fun thing. I love talking about TNG. Maybe we'll do the same with DS9, with Voyager. We're going to talk lots of Star Trek stuff. We're going to keep creating content about this, and maybe we'll do a live video of when Tim gets his tattoo finally, of the tattoo. The Star Trek symbol on his forehead, I think, is what you were going to do, wasn't it?
Nope. And the third season of Discovery is coming up soon. I would like to do that too.
Yeah.
And there's still, like I keep saying, there's a few episodes I'd love to reflect on sort of some of the mythology stuff. Maybe I could do an entire episode just on paintings and painting references in this. That would be interesting. Would people be interested? Maybe if we have viewers, let us know if you actually would be interested. Would you be interested in me talking more about mythologies? Would you be interested in me talking more about like the philosophical stuff that they touch on? Because they touch on a lot of mythology and a lot of philosophical stuff. They did a lot of sort of classical literature or like classics, like Greek classics touched on there. They touched on a lot of painting stuff, some interesting paintings referenced. Steven says we should get Chakotay tattoos. Which would be the
and similarly,
the Star Trek tattoo.
Let me know if you want me to do an episode talking about motorcycles.
Yeah, because it's time to go.
So yeah, we're gonna take your advice, take your comments, take your children. So thanks for tuning in. It's been great. I've enjoyed overall the season. We'll probably do a season recap as well, where I can talk about what I thought over, in a more detailed way. But I'm happy about this show. I'm happy it's on. Sad that this first season's over a little bit. It seemed to go by very fast.
It was 10 weeks.
And very quick, very quick. And the episodes weren't very long. I guess Star Trek that I'm used to is like 20 some episodes, and they're all really long, and you can watch them forever. But so hopefully you guys enjoyed. Leave comments, like, subscribe. Let us know if you think Tim should get that Chakotay tattoo. If we get 3 comments saying, yes, Tim should, he said he would do it. So he has to do it. So, thanks for watching.
We'll need more than 3 comments for me to get a tattoo.
No, you agreed. So as always, I hope we kept you engaged.
Make it so.
Make it snow.
Tea Earl Grey hot.